Good morning, everyone.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. So this is, it's the first online Fabric user group meeting that we've done. So, which is really cool because we get to go and extend our reach to those people, not in Houston, not in the US, so wherever you are. We're going to start by covering, I say Khaled is going to start by covering, to be honest, an important subject, an embryonic subject to some degree, but it's going to talk about Copilot and Power BI and what it means. Sorry, Copilot from a Fabric point of view in Power BI and just from a Power BI point of view. So obviously, Microsoft have been investing significantly in Copilot and in Fabric as well. And the first, the initial tools from Copilot and the effect on Power BI are there. And we really want to go out to the community and just talk everybody through what that means. A lot of people, when it comes to the Fabric side of things, won't be able to go and see what Power BI can go and do, simply due to the restriction for a F64 or P1 tenant, which Khaled has got, so he's going to be able to go and show you that. So we're going to go all the way through from Fabric license SKU P64 P1 in terms of what that's able to do. So that's the kind of like the higher end version, but all the way through to what standard Power BI does. So Khaled's going to talk about how it's all configured, all the things you need to think about, and give you some demonstrations while we go. As I say, I'm going to keep an eye on the questions. Tyson, good morning. Thanks, sir. I'm going to keep an eye on the questions as we're going, and as is practical, we'll fire them to Khaled as we're going. But obviously, we need to go and keep to time as well because we've got an hour for this, so that's partially my job as well. If we miss anything going through, please let me know. And what we'll do is we'll make sure we follow up on anything after. So I mean to take some contact details if you miss anything. So mics are muted for all of this, obviously, so we don't get background noise. And when Khaled gets going, I'm going to mute my mic as well. So if anybody needs anything else, got any more questions or anything, again, as I say, put it into the chat. I'll be keeping an eye on that as we go. And as I say, if we miss anything, we will follow up after, but we're going to need some contact details. Before we get going, and again, so chat being the way to communicate, I don't know if anybody's got any particular things they'd like to see from this session, or if not, we just get going. So I'll give you a minute or so just to put anything in there which could be something important. Although that said, I know I've seen the agenda. Khaled really goes through everything that you'll probably want to see in this.
All right. Thank you, Andy.
All right.
I think before you go mute, don't go mute yet.
Yeah.
So I think the first one, I think so this is we use the user group through the meetup. So if you're not part of it, feel free to join to see what's coming and whatnot. We usually put those out there as quick as we can. And maybe we should do a quick introduction, Andy, a little bit about you.
Oh, what a good idea. Yeah, thank you very much. So it's Andy Clark. I run Clearly Solutions, but I'm the lead Power BI consultant, do a lot of project management. Khaled, over to you in terms of just talking through what data crafters do and your good self.
Yeah, I think same. Also, data analytics consulting. We together run with the help of a few more, run the Houston user group. And the good part for us, we love what we do. At least true for me, Andy.
Yeah, no, so, I do. I even buy merchandise for it.
So it's not enough for us to just do this for work. We do this for our community events as well. So,
yeah.
But anyways, in general, I guess maybe about 8-9 years worth of Power BI veterans. I kind of got started in Power BI pretty early. Pretty excited about Fabric. So glad you guys could join, and we'll kind of take you through one of the features. All right. So to get started, we'll start with how do you turn on Copilot in Power BI. The first thing to understand, Copilot in Power BI is a Fabric feature. So it is not a Power BI premium feature, rather it is the feature of Microsoft Fabric that you get Copilot. So for you to have Copilot in Power BI, you have to have a capacity that's higher than F64 at that moment, or P1, which is equivalent to F64 for Copilot to work. Copilot does not work on free capacities. I guess I don't really have a slide in here for cost, but you do not pay for Copilot separately, even though it, oh, can you guys not see the content, the PowerPoint slide, Andy?
Yeah, Khaled, I can see it. I've heard one person come up to say content is not displaying the same with everybody. A number of other people saying they can see it clearly.
Okay, maybe I think
So I
we
think
can do the most common solution, restart. So if you're having issues seeing it, maybe just trying to disconnect and connect again.
Yeah, it seems that most people can see. Yeah, Khaled, sorry about that. If you log in again, try. Everybody else, thank you very much for confirming you can see it. Appreciate that.
So for a trial capacity, it doesn't work on trials, right? So I don't really have a slide going through the costing of Copilot. It does not cost anything extra. So when you have Fabric capacity, it is included in that. So essentially, whenever you're using it, you are using that same concept of capacity units, which is probably a discussion for another day. We actually have a session coming out in August where we'll go into cost and budgets of Fabric, but in terms of Copilot, you don't pay for it separately. However, it has to be higher than F64, equal or higher than F64, or a P1 where you have Fabric capacity turned on. Right? So to enable Fabric, you have to go to the admin portal tenant settings, enable. This is primarily for your P1, right? For Copilot to work, couple of settings have to be turned on because your data gets moved around a little bit, right? And I think I cover it in the slide before or after. Yes, your data is not retained. So if you have issues with like putting sensitive data and things like that, initially when Copilot came out, they had a 30-day retention thing, but now they've completely gotten rid of it. So your data is secure. It's using the OpenAI's like Copilot's internal architecture, and your data is not retained or used for training. So as you can see, these features have to be turned on an admin portal for you to be able to use Copilot. Once this is turned on, from an tenant admin perspective, there is a permission to delegate permission to capacity admins. However, there's a caveat in there right now that capacity admins cannot force, tenant admins cannot force capacity admins to do something. So technically, if it's off, and then capacity admins can still turn it back on and things like that. So that probably will change over time. All right. So with that, any questions? Let's actually get into the meat of it rather than talking about how to turn it on. All
Yeah,
right.
I can't see any questions, Khaled. So, but if anything comes up, I'll shout it out as they do.
All right, so the way we went about doing this is think about persona perspective, right? So the way we have highlighted this is from a persona of a consumer versus a developer, and a capability perspective, what you can do. and what you can do in Power BI Service versus Power BI Desktop, right? And the good and the bad of Microsoft Fabric is I used to find Power BI Desktop's update nauseating sometimes every month. Fabric kind of is like every day. So I think it's been a little bit quiet on the Copilot Power BI side, but in general, these things change pretty much on a weekly to monthly basis on the new capabilities of what we can do. So this, as of right now, is to the best of my knowledge, all the things we can do using Copilot in Fabric, Power BI, for Power BI specifically. So we'll go through the details of it, and then it's just another way of representing what you can do. In general, obviously, developers can do whatever the consumers can do, obviously. Um, and whatever you can do in service, you can do in desktop at this point, which was a limitation. It's in preview, but you can do whatever you can do in service. The difference is there are certain things you can do in desktop, specifically with DAX. I haven't yet figured out how to do that in service. So there are certain things with DAX, measure descriptions, and Q&A, which are developer features that are more Power BI desktop focused right now that we cannot do in service. So let's start with from a consumer perspective, right? So like how can this work for a consumer, right? So this is a good old report, right? And we're doing this in desktop, but as you can tell, we can do this in Power BI service as well, right? So we are trying to figure out, tell me a little bit about my own data. Andy, how would you have done that before?
This before. I mean, Q&A has been a method, but Q&A has not been hugely used. You go and talk to an analyst and give them a precise description of what they want. I think that's generally how it gets done, isn't it?
Yeah. So I mean, like think about it this way, right? Whether you're a user or a developer, like you got handed something, right? You could ask a question, what is this about? So know a little bit of your data. That's one of the prompts we can use, right? So, and again, now we're in the realm of prompt engineering. It's essentially what prompts you can run through this, right? So that's your what you can do about know your data.
We had
Then
Khaled, so we had a quick question actually from
yeah,
Tarushi. It said tenant admin is the Power Platform admin. And I'm going to say from my point of view, they're different people. So I think what you're talking about when you're saying tenant admin is your Fabric tenant admin or your Microsoft
correct.
365 tenant admin, whereas your Power Platform admin is going to be a subset of that for a Power Platform environment. So the
Yeah, so
admins
I
are
think
different people.
we'll have to keep things confusing, right? So global admins are also by default admin for anything. So global admins by default will become Power BI / Fabric admin, right? So that part they can do. Uh, and if I could be completely wrong, but I don't know whether Power Platform admin has Fabric admin capability or not. They used
I
to, but
don't think so.
I don't think so either, right? So Power
No.
BI is kind of what started Power Platform, and then last year's like, I'll see you later. So Power BI has left unofficially the Power Platform. It's part of
I think
Fabric now.
it's a struggle, isn't it? It's kind of, I don't know. I hope it doesn't go the way of a nasty divorce or something.
I don't
I
think
hope
it's gonna go through a
everybody can
nasty
love Power
divorce.
BI equally.
Yeah, I know. I don't think it's gonna go through a divorce, but I think in terms of Power BI is more focused on like a Fabric workload, and it kind of has always been like that. If you think about how Power Platform environments worked, that never really pushed into Power BI, right? So that was always kind of different. Like the concept of workspaces versus environments were always different. So that hasn't changed. So for this, it would the right answer, from what I understand, is either tenant admin could be a global admin or a Fabric admin, which is a specific admin feature that is specific to Fabric / Power BI. So Power BI admins are called Fabric admins now. All right, so jump to the next one.
Yeah.
So now let's actually ask a question, right? So you can't really take a picture of this and ask ChatGPT to summarize. You could, but now you can ask it directly, right? So uh, like tell me something about the bar chart, right? So you can ask questions directly against the chart, right? As you can tell, it'll come back and tell us this is what the line chart is doing.
So, Khaled, just to be clear, everything we're looking at right now, this is F64 capacity workload effectively. Yeah.
Correct.
Brilliant. Okay. So just so if anybody is looking to go and try this, maybe in the office or maybe at home with their own environment, unless you've got an F64 environment, which I can't remember the starting cost, but it's, you know, obviously it's a corporate environment for hundreds of users, you know, unless you have access to that, you won't be able to do what we're looking at right now. So just so everybody appreciates that.
Yes. So I think one thing I would mention is if you think about like even for us, right? We are relatively small organizations, right? For us to spend $8,400 a month could be a little bit problematic, right? So what we do is we control it through logic apps, and essentially whenever we using the Copilot features, we would essentially go spin it up to F64, do what we need to do, and then spin back down. So if you're trying to tinker around how to do that, do see the sign up for the one that we're doing in August. That essentially is we're doing around controlling the cost and the budget, how you can use it. But the beauty of it is, yes, it's $8,400 or even $5,000 on a reservation per month. Or if you're using the pay as you go, it's also $10 an hour, right? So even though you need a Copilot feature, do you need it all the time? Do you need a specific time? But as Andy put it, be carefully when you go into it. If you forget to turn it off, that will put a burn on your card.
Yeah. Yeah, it's gonna carry on going. So manage your instance wisely. I'm also gonna say hello to our good friend Chewy, who said in the chat, it's for you, Khaled. Power Platform, Power BI equals friends with benefits.
Yeah, yeah,
Chewy, I hope you're well, sir. Hope to see you on Thursday.
So the one we did right before was we're asking a question against a specific visual. And now we are essentially asking it to summarize the entire page, right? So it can know that you're asking a question against a specific visual, if you have a question about line chart, versus if you want an executive summary of the entire page, it can do that as well. That makes sense? And then jumping off from that, the next one we do is you can multiple report pages, you can have it summarize. So
And
think
this would be
about
across everything you've got on the screen there. So if you've got sales quota, whatever may be on page 3 and 4, you can
correct.
ask it questions across those tabs or pages
So
in one go.
yeah, so I think the key over here is summarizing across the pages with whatever is in that report. So one of the questions that I was working with, like a really good company, they're working with, they're trying to figure out how to use Copilot and whatnot. We cannot cross reports yet, at least at this point. So even if in an app, Power BI app, you have multiple reports, it will still stick to the context of that report.
Yeah, exactly. And because is it looking therefore at the data set?
It's not even going at, so essentially the feature we're going to go look at in the next one, right? It can, so think about Power BI Q&A, right? The Power BI Q&A is kind of really good and bad at the same time, right? It understands your model really well, but it's really bad at understanding context. Does revenue mean sales, net sales, whatnot, right? Or what you're asking a human question might not translate to the questions, right? You actually literally have to prompt the questions you wanted to answer, right? Um, that was more from Power BI's Q&A perspective versus Fabric at this point is really good at context, but it did not really answer the same features the Q&A, except this was one of the ones that I had to eat my word earlier this month, Andy,
Mm,
is the new feature that just came out on June 3rd is essentially that you can now, similar-ish to Power BI Q&A, you can ask questions against the semantic model, right?
got
So
it.
now you're actually asking question against the semantic model, but if you notice, I asked a question, it gives me a text. It doesn't really give me Q&A type visual. If you notice, there is a preview feature that is right there
Yep.
in the
Yep.
screen. We'll have to turn the preview feature on first, right? Uh, and then we ask the question again. This time it'll actually give me a graph which is very similar to Q&A. So this is the feature that just came out like on June 3rd or something like that, right? So Copilot is on track to probably replace Q&A.
Yep. Yeah, and these features are getting added, thick and fast at the moment, which means that, recording seminars like this get old very quickly, don't they? In terms of capability. But look, all we can do is go and talk about what we see at a given time but keep everybody up to date as well.
Yeah, I think so. I think one of the key part to understand, I think we'll probably do a follow-up series when we have enough, is essentially the Copilot that we have for Power BI. Even if you go to the first slide, it says Copilot Power BI, but in the middle, I kind of didn't want to confuse anybody, but it's Fabric Copilot. It's not really Power BI Copilot. There's the different Fabric copilots that we get, what we can do with data flow gen 2, the pipelines and stuff like that. As we explore more into each of those areas of what we can do with each of the copilots, we'll bring those in. But unfortunately, those are more developer focused, right? Because we don't really have business users sitting there trying to um, I mean, power users, yes, but just CEO and CFO not trying to figure out what you can do with Copilot on the back end, right?
I think
So
important to everybody to understand and think of Copilot really as an umbrella term for a group of products rather than thinking there's this one Copilot thing everywhere. Of course, with the Copilot Plus PCs that are launched last week, that is a variant of Copilot. We're looking at the Fabric variant of Copilot, and everybody will obviously know that when they go into Power BI Desktop, if you've got the unpaid version, that you can click on Quick Measures, I think it is, and you can use Copilot there to go and write DAX. So Copilot is an umbrella term for a family of products.
and I think it's in here as well, but I think one thing to clarify, the quick measures on Copilot, that one from the best of my understanding, works without F64 capacity. I think it's just how good it is makes a humongous difference if the capacity is turned on or off. But that's kind of the features to our understanding that you can do from a consumer's point of view, right? And there's a question.
So it's a good question. Yeah. So can you show again how to make Copilot answer a question against a semantic model?
Sure. Let's I can just do a replay for that one for now. Can you guys see when I play it, or that's a good question I never really asked.
I can see right now. Give me the total being typed into the Q&A
Okay,
box.
perfect. So I think if you notice, that's the same question we're going to ask. The key for semantic model is you have to turn the preview on. If you notice on the top of the Copilot, it has a preview option. Even though a lot of features are preview, but this one will ask you specifically to turn this preview feature on. So I think, let's see if I drag this earlier. And that's essentially the part we have to do. See, that part has to be turned on. If you turn that on, it will essentially take into the semantic model into factor when it's answering questions with visual itself.
And that can be good and bad, I think, couldn't it? Because there's a lot to be said about asking a question based on the data that's in front of somebody, as opposed to going to the semantic model, which means that it could find data and answer provide an answer to something different to what you've actually asked.
Yes. One of the things as I was kind of working on, right? So I think from a consumer perspective, I'll talk about nuances and things like that towards the end. But if you want to use Copilot from a consumer perspective, the simplest way that you're going to get it to give it a good answer is visualize, right? The moment you expose the semantic model, it is good for power users versus business users. You can walk into problematic scenarios, right? If you expect Copilot to go, hey, go figure out this relationship between this, and that, it will not figure that out. Versus if you're a, say, financial analyst or business user trying to figure out, hey, I need to write the one paragraph summary of the month, big customers, what the big changes are, deltas and stuff like that. If you already have that visualized and you want it to summarize, it actually does a pretty good job of that, right? And you would notice that we'll show you the narrative visual, right? So narrative visual kind of does that a little bit without the prompt. It does preemptively, right? The challenge obviously is find hidden trends. It's not there yet, but it's good at summarizing.
So from what you've seen so Khaled, what have you seen so far? It's good for you going. Where would you say, and again at the consumer level, so the individual that's consuming the data as opposed to the likes of probably most of us on this call, the developers, where would you say it's been particularly strong so far, and maybe where you would urge caution?
On the consumer side, I think if you give the data visualized, right, I think it's pretty decent. It does a decent job because remember my old days before I joined the dark side, I used to be a finance director, right? And like the summaries that it would come up with to explain stuff, it is decent. I would essentially give them like a senior financial analyst what they would come up with. It does it pretty well, right? Can it do diagnostic further? No. If you visualize the information and you can prompt through questions, it will, right? But it will not diagnose something that is not visualized, right? I'm pretty sure we're eventually going to walk into where we are essentially having a full-on conversation. Think about, and this is where the beauty comes, right? So, hey, summarize what happened in the month, and it comes back and say something's wrong in, say, audio sales, right, or whatnot. And then let's pull up the audio sales metrics and go through, run a key influencer or something like that, right? I'm pretty sure we're going to soon get there, but it's not there. But the first summary level, it is good because instead of you reading through all these metrics, you can have it tell you what the thing is and you go do something about it, right? Now, when it comes to the developers, there are things that looks fancy, worthless, but there are things that doesn't look as fancy but very helpful, right? So like as we go through those, we can take a look at that, right? So this is the one that I find fancy but not very useful, right? So what I'm doing right now is asking it to give me idea about what content I can build from this, right? And then as you click on, okay, um, that, and then build me a report page, right? Looks fancy, but it is nowhere near what I would actually end up building.
And I think important to note with this as well, of course, you know, the semantic model you've got is pretty simple here. That looks like a Contoso
Correct.
or similar. Therefore, columns are named well. Links between tables, you know, there's probably a pretty simple start schema that you've got there in terms of the thing that Copilot has got to work with. And I think it's maybe an interesting distinction in terms of, you know, we're doing tests against well-ordered, well formatted star schemas, nice, easy things that, you know, most people are probably rolling their eyes right now thinking, yeah, okay, that's not reality. And look, we know that we do this for a day job too. And I think it's maybe one of the considerations people need to start thinking about if they're looking at Copilot as a longer term tool in terms of how are their semantic models structured properly, so Copilot can really understand things. Because if you've got field names, column names, which really don't reflect the data within it, and which happens quite often, as we all know, then Copilot's going to have a tougher job. So I think there's going to be a key role for all of us in terms of making sure our semantic models are built so Copilot can really take advantage of it. Because I think once it does, if we look at the capability, Khaled, you showed a couple of minutes ago for an end user to be able to go and interrogate and also have a conversation with Copilot about the data, I mean, that's an incredible capability that I'm sure all of us want to be able to give to our users.
Yep. I think so. This is one of the features that I think it looks fancy, but in real life use case, I don't know how often I would end up using it, right? So I'm pretty sure it's going to get better over time where we'll have to give it a long sentence with description on what exactly you want in each graph. I'm pretty sure that will do that. We haven't tested it that far yet, but I think once we get that far, it'll be useful. Or essentially, like the way I'd like using it sometimes, it'll be like, okay, throw enough graphs in there and then I'll go change what I wanted in there.
Yeah.
Right. So that's kind of how I see it. If you're trying to build it to a report page, I would give it very specific. Instructions. Give me this bar chart with this and that. That would work well.
I've got a question here. So, Fernando, so what's funny is I don't sound very Texan. I'm from London, although
he's a transplant.
Yeah. But I live in Houston, Texas, and I've been here for the last 13 years. So thanks. But also, there's a question there as well. Do you have any M code for ETL? Could you give it a go there? And I think the point is, you know, what can we do? The ETL Fernando, please confirm whether I'm correct or not with understanding the question that, you know, should we be doing a lot of work at the ETL stage, whether it be Power Query or other, and do a lot of the work there to get column names correct, make sure data is formatted correctly, blah, blah, blah. And if I've got the question correct, then I would say absolutely, you know, always try and do as much as you can at the ETL. Okay, all the above, thanks. Always try and do as much as you can at the ETL stage, so the data you get from Power BI is as clear as possible. Khaled?
Yeah. So I think if I add on to what Andy was saying is absolutely right. So this is Roche's famous maxim, right? Do transformation as upstream as possible and downstream as necessary, right? In terms of using Copilot for M code, you cannot use Copilot on Power Query desktop. However, you can use Copilot for Power Query in Dataflow Gen 2, which is not a Power BI artifact. It's a Fabric artifact. Gen 1 doesn't have Copilot, Gen 2 does, right? So we wanted to keep it very Power BI specific for this session, right? We are actually started working on investigating and interrogating what all the things we can do with Copilot in each of those experiences. So we'll show hopefully on different ones we'll go through that. Does that answer your question, Fernando?
Maybe. We'll take that. Fernando, leave anything else after. And if there's anything else more complex, we'll get back to you.
All right. So this is the narrative visual, right? So if you notice, the narrative visual is what used to be our smart visual, right? And whenever you turn it on, it says, do you want to use Copilot or go the old route? So when you turn on Copilot, and you can have it summarize a specific page, a specific visuals, or all the pages and all the visuals if you want. And this is, think about in a way that you are preempting a prompt. So you're not even waiting for users to run a prompt. Whenever the users open it, it will run that prompt for them, right? So we used to have the narrative visual, which was pretty cool, but now with Copilot, you don't have to run those messy DAX and figure out, okay, I'm going to explain customer first, up and down first, top first, or whatnot. It will figure that out on its own. All right. So now this is the part we are entering the realm of Power BI Desktop. And the first thing we can, so this are only in desktop. You cannot do this in Power BI Service. You'll have to turn all these preview features on before you can do it. And for you to use Copilot, you're gonna have to assign a Fabric backed capacity. So when you go to the options, right? You go to, if you notice, there is a new pane for Copilot, and then select workspace. This workspace has to be F64, like appropriate capacity backed for Copilot to work on your Power BI desktop. So Copilot desktop doesn't work without internet or the capacity.
So another question. So I think, Fernando, there are a lot of options on DAX query view also for Copilot.
That is correct.
Yeah, show that.
So let's kind of, so here is your create and modify DAX, right? Your DAX query view. And these are your standard stuff that it's suggesting, right? As you can see, it's somewhere like possible DAXes you can do.
And again, Khaled, is that you're getting these responses? Is that due to the fact it's looking at a F64 capacity?
Correct. So it's using the F64 capacity. It's running a real-time So it has context of the model it's in, obviously, right? But the think about Copilot, OpenAI backend, right? It's using through the capacity that's is connected. That's kind of the thing I showed earlier, right? That's how it can run things in desktop, right? So like this is not in here, but I was kind of testing around with rolling averages the other day, right? And I tried quick measures, and quick measures wouldn't go anywhere. Versus this Copilot does a decent job of DAX, and it not only that, it's actually not bad at editing DAX. There's not a like a specific example of that, but if you run a DAX, you have a DAX measure and you want to optimize it, it instead of copy pasting that into like your ChatGPT subscription, you could have it try to run one, right? And once you do that, it'll actually do a diff next to it saying what is it proposing from like a measure perspective. So can it write all your DAX for you? Unfortunately, no.
But
But
editing is sometimes useful, and you would hope that it would do a half decent job here because it's got some context beside it. And because one of the challenges you have when you're using ChatGPT is you need to give ChatGPT a lot of context about what you're trying to do if you want an even vaguely correct answer.
Correct. So I think that's the biggest advantage Copilot DAX has, is because it has access to your actual schema.
Yeah.
All right. This is the quick measure one. And this one is the only feature that works without a capacity. But I need to test this as well, how well it does without the capacity turned on. It does, like for me, when I tried to do it the first time without the capacity turned on, it didn't do a really good job of it. But that's the another way you can use Copilot on DAX.
And it's great because everybody can go and do that. Everybody can go and try that out and see how it works. And, you know, I would advise anybody looking to use it to go and run a number of tests first. Because I think what we've seen is that it's done a pretty decent job there, I think, from what you just asked. But what we've seen is it can be hit and miss sometimes with getting things correct. And what you can find is that you can ask a query, you can ask the same query again later in the day, and you can get a different response. So do some tests first on what you're doing. And, you know, one of the things that we have been urging people away from who are completely new to writing DAX as using this as a method to be able to go and write DAX, because the issue is that, you know, a lot of those individuals don't know what's correct or not. So if you want to go and use this, wonderful, go for it with this ChatGPT. But I would definitely advise that you know what you're doing first so you can spot the errors, because some of the errors can be quite subtle and you'll get a slightly incorrect response as opposed to a really incorrect response. So yeah, bear that in mind.
Yeah, so I think as Andy said, I think if you are a DAX Pro, this will be helpful. So instead of you copy pasting tabulator and whatnot, you want to do some changes, it'll do it really well. But if you don't understand row context and filter context and you're making it write your DAX, you can walk into pretty scary scenarios. So always test the code to make sure that it's generating what you expect it to, right? And in general, what I have found Copilot to be slightly behind whatever GPT can do, even though this one has the advantage of the model schema, but which is actually a good thing because this one doesn't hallucinate as much. So they have some guardrails in there to make sure that it doesn't give you as much of a hallucination answer as the other one, and that's why it's kind of held back a little bit.
Yeah, I'm finding I'm going to ChatGPT more than Copilot if I need to get anything done, or when I'm testing, more importantly.
Yeah. So this one is actually quite useful, right? We all love doing documentation, right, Andy? You want to do that every day of the day?
Documentation. Wow, I love the importance of documentation. I don't enjoy it. It's like testing. It's really important. We've really got to go and do it. But do we wake up in the morning and leap out of bed because you've got documentation to do? Generally not.
But see, this one I find it really useful, right? So I think like just trying to put descriptions and stuff like that. This is like a couple of clicks through, and we have decent descriptions for what our measures do and things like that. And it's reading the DAX code. If you have calculates and stuff like that, it will write a decent job of a description for your measures and stuff like that, which
Yeah.
I would advise if anybody don't do it, please start doing it. It will save you and your users a lot of like a heartache. But and it's
Yeah.
one of those high priority, low on urgency thing that never gets done.
Yeah.
This is one of the ones that you can take care of easily. Right?
Yeah, I'm sure you've got an awful lot of heads nodding in the background there. Yeah, and I must admit, when I've put DAX into ChatGPT and asked it to document it, it's generally done a pretty decent job.
Yeah.
Oh God, so Fernando, good question. Can you ask it to create descriptions for all of the measures at once? I think the answer is going to be no on that one. I think you have to go into each
I
measure. But
think it's
Khaled,
probably no at right now, but eventually it's probably coming.
yeah, that would just be a dream come true. Just go and describe all of the stacks in this model.
Yeah, so I think like hold on, let me not get people confused with the one that's playing right now. Um, The challenge is, right? So I think what I usually like doing is I'll create the measures description on my key measures first. So your net sales, net revenue, and whatnot, and all the dependent ones. I would preferably write the like go write this on your own because that one I don't will not feed any context into it, right? So I think that's the slight part that I would think about, right, when you're trying to do it massively. I don't know of a way of doing this for all the measures at the same time, but I'm pretty sure it's coming. One of the ones that I don't have it in here that our good friend Nicola showed me, I'll probably throw that in there later. So when you start a model and you want to create all the calculations like the sums and the counts and stuff like that, or before, so essentially converting from implicit to explicit measure, there is one that you can do that where you write the code and say give me every single explicit measure for all my numeric values. It will do that, and then you just click on import, 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 and it will just add it to the model. It doesn't let you do import all at the same time, but it'll write all of them and you just click through it. So I do have an example for that that's not in this one, but I'll try to put it out there on LinkedIn how to do it maybe sometime this week. But that one was done by, I learned how to do that from Nicola on that one.
Can I just see where we've got just 9 minutes left? So I don't know if you want to get some questions in, or if we get any key things you
Yeah, I
excuse
think
me, want to
we're
finish
good. I
with.
think like give me like 3 minutes to kind of get through this, and then
Yeah,
we'll kind of go there. See, now
brilliant.
this one, if you notice, this is the enhanced Q&A feature, right? This is the one that for those of us who try to figure out Q&A in the old days, right? We had to write a lot of synonyms and stuff like that. Copilot actually does a decent job over here, right? So this is kind of probably one feature that you might be able to write more description at one shot. So I might be correcting myself on that one, Andy, what Fernanda was asking. I think if you go through the enable Q, like the enhanced Q&A feature, you might be able to do multiple one of them at the same time.
Okay.
All right. Now the finally, I think Andy highlighted this multiple times. like having clear relationships, tables, facts versus dimension, calculation logic, naming conventions. Uh, goes a long way because, funny enough, Copilot is more similar to business users than devs. That the more descriptive your names are,
Yeah.
the easier it'll do.
Yeah, I think there's a really important job out there for all of us with whether our users are our colleagues or whether we're working with separate customers, just to really think about the customer data and how it's structured and named as we go forward into this age of AI. Because I think what's like to happen is that people are going to want to start using AI in some way with the data, and the better structured it is for AI, the easier it's going to be. So it just keeps momentum in projects.
Also on the chat, there is Rishi, our good friend, dropped in a um, nice link. I have not really gone through it, but I think there are a couple of automations that you can do based off more on the Pro Code GPT version of it, not so much the Copilot version, but I'm guessing those will eventually come. But for those of you that want to jump in from a more technical perspective, there's a really good article that Rishi put in the chat.
Yeah, and Rishi, I think it's Rishi that's asked this question. Is there another layer where we can store metadata descriptions, purview, question mark, that can be accessed by Azure AI search or something similar? I'm not aware, Khaled.
Not that I know of at this point.
Yeah.
But they
So
are
guys,
actively collecting feedback right now. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I was going to say to everybody, any more questions, please just put them into the chat right now in the final minutes that we've got, just in case. The other thing we should do, I don't know if, do we've had all of our contact details on any of these slides?
No, I mean,
So
I
if anyone
think,
wants to get in touch.
yeah, so I think easiest way to find me or Andy is probably LinkedIn.
Yeah, so what I'll do quickly, well, if you're just finishing off, I'll put our LinkedIn URLs into the chat so anybody can find us.
So some of the limitations, I think we covered a couple of them as we went through. Uh, it can generate reports, like if you wanted to come up with a report, but it cannot edit them, right? So it's not something you can go back and forth. You'll essentially have to keep scripting it to give it better instructions to come up with a report. Uh, Funny enough, it can generate a report that has mistakes. So use with caution. So human validation doesn't go away, it just makes us faster. But in this scenario, sometime you don't need to put in garbage to get garbage out sometimes. So be careful of that and make sure you're doing ample validations. These tools are very powerful as it makes our life easier, but it doesn't completely take away the requirement of having foundational knowledge of doing it that way.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. And Fernando's pointed out the cost in the, right now, to get the real benefits that we've shown today, you're on F64. And it's a corporate to enterprise variant in terms of cost.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. So I think one of the things that we do, I'll just quickly show you that way it makes sense. I guess while I'm doing that, I think we have just put in the meetup. I haven't created the LinkedIn events yet. We are taking a little bit break for summer in July, where things heat up in Houston, and we're trying to both get out of Houston for a little bit. We'll come back and do two more virtual sessions in August, one around cost, specifically as you're talking about cost and the real world usage patterns, right? And then obviously the other one is kind of getting more into the architecture and how to design the information flows, how to think of lake houses, warehouses, and stuff like that. But I think I have my thing open. Let's see. Workspace. All right, so it's a perfect way to show this. Andy, let me know if you guys can see my screen.
Yeah, so data crafters, you can see your Power BI.
So it's a Copilot
service.
demo, right? If I try to go to this workspace and you notice it cannot load the model because obviously my capacity is sleeping. And we built out our own thing where with logic apps, we'll start the capacity on. So you can do this with Power Automate, but you got to pay a premium license versus Logic app doesn't require that. And on the back end, I actually should have gotten a notification saying that the capacity has been turned on. And then I'll just go ahead and reload this and go about my way. And it'll give me, there you go. See, now it loaded. If I click on, where's my Copilot button? Now it doesn't show my Copilot button. Let's see. There you go, Copilot. See? Sometimes you're going to get questions, you want to cover your butt. This can help you train. So this is kind of one of the ways we use Copilot. So that, yes, it's $8,400, but it's also $10 an hour. You can do the patterns in different ways, but everything has pros and cons of the design. All right. Any other questions?
Nothing in the chat. I've shared our LinkedIn contact details, so please feel free to get in touch with us that way and ask any other questions you may have.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for your time.
Yeah.
Hope to see you in the next one.
All
and then
right.
hopefully
Thanks,
as summer
everybody.
cools down, we'll probably go back in person in September.
Brilliant. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much.